Hello and welcome to another We Are Sunderland video. As you can see, it's a bit of a feature episode today because we've got a very special guest joining us. But before we get to the introductions, as ever, I just want to say a quick shout out to our partners down at the Sunderland Fans Museum. You know, it's the place for all your pre-match entertainment. You can have the opportunity to check out plenty of match-worn memorabilia, get your pictures taken, and you never know, you might bump into the odd Sunderland legend or two while you're in there as well. Plenty of community work throughout the week, which you can check out. And there's also lots of interesting and exciting stuff coming up as well between our partnership for you to keep your eyes on. As ever, don't forget to subscribe and like to all of our channels. You know, you can still take advantage of our launch offer. It's just £1 for 6 months worth of content. I'm a little bit biased, but I'd say if you've already signed up, you've already had your money's worth for £1. So if you're missing out, get joined up and then see what we're all about. Now to today's show. As you can see, it's a very special guest. We are joined by Scott Wilson from the Northern Echo and the voice of Sunderland, BBC Radio Newcastle's Nick Barnes. How are we?
All good, thank you. I thought the special guest was Scott, actually, so I'm flattered.
No, Barnesy. No. We know who's special in this call. Don't worry about that. I enjoy you. All right, mate?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very good. Before we get into it, I suppose, Nick, for those of us, everyone who's listening to this and watching this will know who you are, of course. But for those one or two who might have been under a rock for the last number of years, I guess just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to get where you are now covering Sunderland.
Right, that goes back a long way. I started broadcasting with the BBC in 1986 in Devon, moved to Cumbria in 88, became sports editor there in 92, and I decided that we needed to beef up our coverage of Carlisle United, to cut a long story short. So I started commentating on Carlisle in 92 through until 98, when I fell out with Michael Knighton and was about to be banned. So I moved to London for a summer with Ian Dennis, who many will know in the Northeast because he used to work at Radio Newcastle and is now the 5 Live football correspondent. We went to London for the summer when the World Cup was on in France, and he was the Newcastle United commentator then, but he was leaving there to go to Leeds. And so I stepped into his shoes in Newcastle, knowing I wasn't going back to Carlisle because of my fallout. And then 5 years with Newcastle, Ruud Gullit for a year, then Bobby Robson for 4 years. And then I moved over to Sunderland and have been with Sunderland for 20 years. That's it. A potted history.
Plenty of stories and memories there. Scott, can you beat that?
No, so when did you actually start on the Sunderland beat then, Nick?
The season 2003-2004. So my first game, you may remember this because I was chatting with someone the other day about remembering our first games. And my first game, I think, was a friendly at Carlisle with Sunderland. But then the first commentary game, because Benno had to do a trial to see whether he was up to being summariser. So we did a game at Kilmarnock. So we did a friendly at Kilmarnock. I think there may have been one or two friendlies after that. Then our first league game, first technical sort of proper commentary was at Nottingham Forest, beginning of that season, which was an evening kickoff, I think.
Because I joined the Echo February 2004. So I'm just about hitting 20 years. And my first Sunderland game, my first game with the Echo full stop, was a FA Cup replay at Birmingham. Sunderland.
Yes. Tommy Smith scored in extra time, yeah.
I think Tommy Smith scored both the goals.
Yeah, but both in extra time, I think. It was. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. 2-0 was it?
That was my first game kind of halfway through that season, Yeah.
So that'll have been the season.
Good old Mick McCarthy, not bother me arse. Sorry.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, saying that'll have been the season just back in the Championship under Mick McCarthy, am I right in saying?
It was. That was the one.
That's right.
After their 19-point season.
Yeah.
So it's all your fault then, Scott.
Oh yeah, so it was hitting the ground running with all of that, wasn't it? Exactly, yeah.
No,
so my second game for the Echo was Borough winning the Carling Cup in Cardiff. So it really has gone downhill for the North.
It was. The nadir that season was, of course, when they went to Preston with Mick McCarthy, and they could have become or equaled Darwin's record of however many straight defeats it was, which would have been a football record, of course, full stop.
Yeah.
But they managed to stop the rot with a 2-0 win. I remember Sean Proctor, I think it was Sean Thornton, scored a screamer of a free kick, and they won 2-0. But strangely, Darwin were there that day. They went to watch, thinking that their record was going to be eclipsed.
Yeah.
But no, they managed to. It's weird how Sunderland always managed to hold off those records, because they had that season when Kevin Ball became caretaker. Well, it was that season, I think, when Mick McCarthy was sacked. Kevin Ball was caretaker, and they hadn't won a home game all season. The Fulham game was abandoned when he was in charge. When they were losing, so they were probably odds on going to lose the game, but they managed to win the replay, or the game was when it was rearranged. So they held off that other ignominious record, which would have been the only football club ever to have lost every home game in a season. So they always do it. They always go to the brink. Always go to the brink.
Yeah, that was after 2 record point seasons, wasn't it, in the Premier League?
Yeah.
Halcyon days, I suppose.
That's one way of looking at it,
yeah. You've obviously addressed a lot of managers in that time as well. I suppose, just to finish up on this bit, any that stand out over the years for you?
Oh, well, Roy Keane, clearly. Roy Keane was brilliant, absolutely wonderful to deal with. Scott will, I think, agree with me there. It's a shame it ended the way it did, but he was great to deal with. I also got on very well with, dare I say, Steve Bruce. Just because he was just a genuine guy, was very personable, very old-fashioned, old school, if you like, in dealing with the press. You could call him any time, so on and so on. And Martin O'Neill, I liked a lot. And latterly, of course, Tony Mowbray. I haven't heard a single word from anyone that has anything bad to say about Tony Mowbray. And he was brilliant to deal with. So they're probably the standouts. But honestly, we've had so many: Gus Poyet, Mad Paolo, Dick Advocat, you name it. There've been that many. Jack Ross was very good, so on and so on. It's ridiculous, really, to look back at those 20 years, and in the 20 years. And before that, I covered a few games for Sunderland when I was at Newcastle for one reason or another. Peter Reid. In 20 years, it's been 20 managers, I think, which is just, and that's not even caretakers. So, which just explains, says it all. Yeah, basically, you're never going to achieve success if you can't achieve any sort of sustainability in terms of consistency with a manager.
Yeah, that's it. There's never hasn't been stability, has there, for so long, which obviously brings us to who's currently in the hot seat in Michael Beale. It's been a fair old baptism of fire for him, hasn't it, in the opening sort of 6 or 7 weeks that he's been here. What have you kind of made of his introduction to the club?
Well, it's been a bit surreal. I've never, and I don't think Scott would have seen anything like this in terms of the rapidity in which the fan base turned against him. 7 games in, and he's basically fighting for his managerial life, if you like, head coach life, against Stoke on Saturday. If they'd lost that game, I think there's a fair chance he would probably been sacked. And to be in that position after that so few games is crazy, really. I do feel sorry for him. I think he was unfairly targeted in many ways. I don't think he, didn't help himself clearly with some of the comments he's made over the last couple of weeks. But he didn't create this situation. The club created the situation when they sacked Tony Mowbray. They then it became the perfect storm with the derby, the Black Cat Bar, quiet transfer window, Michael Beale coming in, not getting 100% the results that he wanted, and the team looking as though it was going backwards rather than forwards for a few weeks. It didn't look as though there was much improvement. All that combined, then Michael Beale had that fight on his hands, and as I say, last week didn't exactly endear himself to the supporters with some of his comments in his pre-match. But at least the win on Saturday with the background to that Pritchard business, but to get the win, it's just calmed a lot of people down. I think it was a good display. They could have lost the game, they didn't. They thankfully scored the first goal that set them on the way. They got 3 goals, and I think some of the performances in the game as well proved that if there was any question the players weren't playing for Beale, well, that wasn't the case at the weekend. A lot of players seem to get their mojo back. So I think hopefully the Stoke game has turned a corner. I'm not saying it solved everything or anything, but it certainly meant or means going into this week with the transfer window and a couple of bodies coming in, Pritchard leaving, I think it steadies the ship, and they can at least head into the Borough game without necessarily the furore and the frenzy and that feral sort of Beale out sort of background to the game, and we can focus on the football.
Yeah, it did kind of feel as though it could have been a really uncomfortable atmosphere before the game. I mean, Scott, do you agree that even though with this win, like we say, very much needed, it does, me and Dom touched on this a little bit yesterday, it feels as though he's probably never going to be far away from having to put fires out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what Saturday did more than anything else is it reminded everyone that actually not everything is rotten at Sunderland at the minute, because that's what it felt like over the last couple of weeks. It felt like everything at the club was falling apart and we were right back to the absolute dark days that we all remember. Well, there's a lot that's gone wrong at Sunderland, but this is still an exciting young squad. I think most fans would agree that the general trend of the kind of what Sunderland are trying to do in terms of the transfer business and in terms of developing players, playing on the front foot if they can, that you know, there's general support for that. I think people think that is the right way to go. Clearly, there have been massive obstacles in the road along that way, but you know, this is still a Sunderland squad with Jack Clark in it, with Dan Neil in it, with Anthony Patterson in it. You know, some local lads, some lads that have been brought in, but players who A, are exciting, and B, will safeguard the future of Sunderland as long as they're dealt with sensibly along the way. So, you know, and it's a club that's on the brink of the playoffs. You know, they're right there. You know, it is certainly not inconceivable that Sunderland get in the playoffs again this season, which, you know, it didn't really feel like that was the backdrop to what was going on in the last couple of weeks, did it? So I think that was the big positive from the weekend. Now, as you rightly say, you know, the reality with Michael Beale is exactly that, I think, that he can win 4 games in a row, and as soon as he loses the 5th one, questions will be asked and fingers will be pointed. And I just think that's the situation that we're in at the minute. Now, can he get out of it? Well, he can, because he can win games. So that's the first clearly key thing that's going to help him get out of it. I do think that he can look at the way that he's speaking and what he's saying and work at his dialogue with the fans, because that's clearly been an issue in the last week, hasn't it? That for whatever reason, he felt that he was going to take this head on, and he said some, you know, things that I'm sure, well, I'd like to think that perhaps now he thinks, do you know what, that wasn't the best route to go down.
But he certainly changed what he, his demeanour and his manner after the game on Saturday. There was a noticeable shift in the way he talked about the fans and the situation, and that's
going to be important, isn't it?
It is.
That he keeps that, you know, because, you know, whether it was just because he felt he was being backed in a corner, I don't know. But we were both there. Well, all 3 of us were there on Thursday with the kind of, you know, the press conference in the dark and then huddled around a table with him and all of that. And you were coming away from it thinking, you know, our job is to report what's said and to try and give a bit of context and a bit of analysis. But you did come away from that thinking, do you know what? We're gonna kind of bury him here. And nobody wants to do that, but you've got to do it. You've got to, you know, our job is to report what's said, and he said it. And I do think that he needs to learn that lesson. But listen, football's football. If Sunderland win the next 4 games, the mood will be markedly different. Are they going to do that? Probably not. It's the Championship. You don't necessarily go on those runs. So you're right. Whenever a loss comes up, questions will be asked. But at least, as Nick said, we're not heading to the Riverside in that absolute furore of it, where it just feels like everything's suffocating. There's that little bit of breathing room now, at least.
Yeah, he obviously wasn't helped as well. You mentioned it at the start there about the Alex Pritchard situation. I guess from both of your points of view, how do you sort of see that? Obviously, it looks as though it is at an end. He's set to move away. It looks as though Birmingham City is where he's going to end up, ironically, back with Tony Mowbray as well.
Yeah, well, clearly we as you'll know, Dom Shaw, me and Phil Smith from the Echo, we had a meeting with Kristjaan Speakman on Saturday, basically briefing us what had happened with Alex Pritchard. And the reason for that is, as Kristjaan explained during the meeting, that there is lots of things that go on during the year which the club could respond to, stories in the press, stories on social media, which they say are clearly not right. But he feels it's never worth their while coming on and saying that's not right, this isn't right, because he would spend his life actually on social media and talking to us, trying to put the record straight and trying to brief us all the time. But when something like this happened with Alex Pritchard, there was clearly going to be an issue on Saturday. If the club had said nothing about what had happened, the team sheets would have come out at 2:00. Pritchard's name wouldn't have been on it. And the immediate reaction would have been, what on earth's Michael Beale done now? I can't believe he's left Pritchard out. And you can imagine what the atmosphere would have been like at the Stadium of Light before kickoff. I think we would all agree if this Pritchard thing hadn't happened, the atmosphere would have been fine. The fans would have got behind the team come what may, as they did, because they weren't going into the game thinking, oh, this is Michael Beale's doing. It was very much Alex Pritchard's issue, as it was, as it transpires. And we got a lot of background on Pritchard and this sort of long-running narrative that we've always believed, I think, that the issue was the club not letting Pritchard play. When it turns out, it seems it was the other way around. Pritchard himself wanted to go last summer, but couldn't find a club. But when he said he wanted to leave, the club, of course, thinking he's going to go, had to bring in replacements for him. So Dak and Job, Sheesh to an extent, were the replacements for Pritchard. Pritchard didn't get a club, couldn't find a move, so is still at the football club. So Tony Mowbray is then left with a dilemma. Mowbray decides that Pritchard wants away, doesn't want to, be involved at Sunderland, so leaves him out of his teams. Plays Dak, a player he knows very, very well and loves, and Job and Ashish. And it was only when Tony left that Mike Dodds, who didn't have that issue, decides to bring Pritchard back into the fold. Pritchard plays really well. The club then decides that because he is playing so well, to bring forward contract talks, which would normally be in March or April, as Kristjaan Speakman, in inverted commas, calls their succession plans, are usually carried out in March or April, that Pritchard was offered the new 1-year extension on his current terms. He had several conversations with Pritchard during the week. And clearly, when we spoke to him on Thursday, no indication that anything was awry then. But then out of the blue on Friday, Pritchard and his agents phoned up to say he wasn't going to play. Clearly trying to engineer a move, which the club said they'd had an impression that the agents had said Turkey, but they feel that might have been a little bit of a red herring just to try and get things moving. But they always felt Birmingham was probably the club that were going to, or Pritchard was aiming to leave for, but they'd had no contact from them. Well, events now make it look like it clearly was Birmingham. But the club left in a dilemma then. They won't want to terminate his contract because that's just cowing to what Pritchard and his agents want. The best all-round solution was a move to Birmingham and a fee and whatever, so they get something back for him and they get his wages off the wage bill. Not ideal, not a great situation. And I think the general consensus is that most fans would see Alex Pritchard as the person in the wrong here because, all those I've spoken to, plus former pros, all say the one thing you don't do is, you're under contract, you're a professional player, you don't not play, you don't refuse to play. So it was a bit unsavoury. It wasn't great. The timing was poor. But hopefully now, they've dealt with it quickly and swiftly. And fingers crossed we can just move on from this whole episode.
I think Nick's absolutely right there that Pritchard has blotted his copybook in the eyes of an awful lot of supporters, and I think rightly so because as Nick said, you're being very well paid to be a professional footballer. Downing tools is really just not on. That's indisputable. I don't think. The only thing I would add is that I guess all of this does come amid the backdrop of our Sunderland now absolutely carte blanche saying we will not retain or offer lengthy contracts to players in their late 20s, 30s, early 30s, because that's the backdrop to this, isn't it? It's the fact that Dan Bath went in the summer. It's the fact that it doesn't look like they're going to be signing anyone of that kind of age bracket in the foreseeable future at all. So, do Sunderland need a more flexible approach to their transfer policy when it comes to older players? That's the backdrop, and I think that's the wider picture that all of this feeds into. And that's an interesting one, because clearly at the moment, the view of Kristjaan Speakman and the rest of the recruitment team seems to be no, we don't need to be more flexible. We're not going to get ourselves into a situation where we've got a load of 30-year-olds on lengthy contracts that don't have a resale value, and we're going to probably have to write off at some stage further down the line. Now, where I contrast it to is, so we at the Echo obviously also cover Middlesbrough. In the last 12, 18 months, they've very much started to go down the same route as Sunderland. They're targeting younger players. They're targeting players from overseas. They're looking at development and resale and all of that kind of stuff. But when they needed to plug a gap at right back earlier this month, they signed Luke Ayling on a 6-month loan deal from Leeds, and are potentially might offer him a 1-year deal in the future. They've consistently offered new contracts to Johnny Howson, who's turning 36, because they still think he's got a value in the dressing room and in the heart of midfield. That's my worry for Sunderland's transfer policy at the minute. That yes, it's the general direction of travel, I think, is laudable and is right, but I worry that you probably do need a little bit of flexibility. That if there is an Alex Pritchard who is playing really well, and can be an important figure, but Bart as well, clearly had an importance within the dressing room. Is there the flexibility within there to retain some of those players? Because I think if you get rid of all of them, that's maybe a dangerous route to go down.
Well, this is going to come to a head again with Corey Evans, who I think is a player that they've missed badly this season. I think Evans, I think now with the season where we're at, and tired legs, and we've still got 17 games to go, Evans is a classic example of a player who in a lot of games this season would have been the experienced head. They probably wouldn't have lost 4-0 to Borough. And you can go in other games where he could have calmed things down. Now, where will they be when Evans' contract comes up? I agree with Scott entirely. This whole model is based on this principle of hiring young players with a value now which will be increased, and they can sell them on, and then gradually over the seasons exponentially you can lift the bar on what you're paying as a wage. You can increase the value of the players, make a profit. But to be sustainable as well in this league alone, let alone the Premier League, I think you need experience. I think if you're going to, I think that's been proved when you look at the division this year, the 4 teams that have come down out, the 3 teams that came down from the Premier League are all back in the top 4. Ipswich's policy is to buy not just young players, but experienced players. Consequently, they're in the top 6. Coventry this summer had a wholesale change of personnel. Well, they haven't been buying 19, 20-year-olds. They've been buying quite a few experienced players, as well as some younger players like Sims. I do think you need that blend. So I hope that, going down the road, Sunderland aren't cutting their nose off to spite their face, saying, unquestionably, we don't sign any players over the age of 22 because they don't fit the model. Because I think the model's got to be elastic. I think there has got to be room to accommodate experienced players. Now, Kristjaan Speakman's argument is that, well, we have got experienced players. We've got Luke O'Nien. He's 29. He's just been offered, he's got a new longer contract. But he's few and far between. There aren't many Luke O'Niens in the Sunderland squad now. They gradually, and Danny Bart was another good example of a player who Sunderland fans still can't understand why they let him go. He was player of the season, and he would have had a part to play this season. So we're at a bit of a crossroads, keeping hold of the likes of Jack Clark now, and Dan Neil, and Dan Ballard, Anthony Patterson. It's important. I think the club have got to show their mettle in that sense if they're being tested by outsiders to try and prize those players away, because they, keeping hold of those players is another crucial cog in the wheel, if you like, because if they do bow and start selling players, then the model collapses because you can't sustain it over the period they're hoping to sustain it to build on. So I think we're at a crossroads. I think this window and this summer are going to be important. But I agree with Scott entirely on this issue about getting or having experience in the dressing room.
Yeah, I mean, Lyndon Gooch is another one, isn't he? We saw the sort of reception that he got. I suppose that the club and the ownership group, they'll look, you mentioned him there, Jack Clark. He's a player who was brought in League One for less than £1 million. And you just have to look at the figures that are being touted around that they're going to hold out for and the clubs that are coming in for him now. There's to demonstrate that it is successful as well. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, entirely. But I mean, this is the whole issue that the Clark, you would hope he would go in the summer for 20 million plus. I think they've got to be looking at that sort of figure for him now. And if they sell Clark for that sort of figure, and let's for argument's sake say Dan Neil or Dan Ballard goes for similar sums, they have got to reinvest that money then in buying a player or players, not at $1 million, not at 5 million, maybe at £7 or £8 million, because that's the only way you're going to develop the squad technically, if you like, with the experience and the expertise that you want to take it up to the next level. Now, I think that's the theory, but it's probably far harder to put into practice, I think, in the market, which is becoming, as Scott alluded to there, Middlesbrough may be going down the road of buying younger players. Now, other clubs will start to follow suit. So the market will get squeezed, if you like, because all the clubs will be looking at the same players. And as Kristjaan Speakman alluded to when we spoke to him on Thursday, the targets they're going for, 6, 7, 8 clubs are looking at the same players. And that's with the way the market is at the minute. Heaven knows what it's going to be like in a year's time.
Yeah, I think what happens if or when a Clark or a Neil or a Ballard is sold is the next really interesting element in all of this, I think, because as Nick says, I don't think that's going to happen this month. I think Sunderland will hold on to Clark this month, but I think there's a very good chance he'll go in the summer. If you're bringing in that kind of money, then as Nick says, the whole idea of the project, if you like, is you then raise your sights of what type of player you can bring in next. Well, that's fine, but that's going to need a demolishing of the current wage structure, because if you're paying 7, 8, 9, 10 million pounds for a player, you're not going to be bringing them in on the current wages that Sunderland are paying. And B, you're then looking at a different type of competition for those players. 7, 8, 10, 15 million pound strikers probably want to be in the Premier League. So if you're Sunderland in the Championship, you've really got to sell something to be able to bring those players in. And eventually it's probably going to come down to money. So again, as I keep coming back to, you're going to have to really completely redraw your wage structure. And I think that's interesting as to how...
Well, I think that's something that Tony Mowbray touched on, of course, when he was here, talked about Blackburn, because Blackburn went through this sort of process of when he arrived in League One, the wages were wherever. When he left 5 years later, they'd reached the 20,000 plus mark a week. But it took Blackburn 5 years.
Yeah.
And we know Blackburn are in financial trouble now. Now, that's not because... they're adopting a sustainability model or the project like Sunderland. That's an issue with the Venkies and the way that club is dealt with. But the basic premise remains the same. It took Blackburn 5 years to reach the level at which they could afford to, pay probably higher level Championship wages. And it's going to take Sunderland as long, if not longer, because they're starting from such a low base, if you like. I think are they the second lowest wage payers in the Championship? They're certainly not anywhere near the highest.
They were when it came up, certainly weren't they?
So they might have. I think it might have crept up a little bit in the last year, but not to the point where they can compete with your Middlesbroughs, your Coventrys, your Blackburns, who what was it when we were at Blackpool the other year in League One? I think it was. Anyway, they had Poveda from Leeds on loan from, admittedly it was Premier League club at the time, but Poveda was earning £50,000 a week.
Yeah.
Now that is just, extraordinary. But the point is he'll be on that still in the Championship with Leeds because that's his contract and they've been relegated. But, those clubs at the top end of the table are paying, what did Ross Stewart, he trebled his, he quadrupled his wage. I mean, he went from something ridiculous like 2,000 or 3,000 a week to 30,000 a week at Southampton. Sunderland aren't in that ballpark at the moment, and probably won't be for a few years.
Yeah, it certainly feels like the gap is widening, doesn't it? Which makes the transfer windows and things like that even more difficult. Now, we were all there for the Kristjaan Speakman talking last week. How did you assess what came across and what came out of that? We're getting closer, deadline's only a couple of days away now. Still without any signings yet, although it does look as though that's going to change imminently. It feels as though, we could say this every transfer window at this time, but it does feel, given what's happened over the last few weeks, like we talked about with Michael Beale and all the off-field things, that this one in particular, they need to get a couple of things right here over the next couple of days.
I think it's going to be tough. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think from Kristjaan Speakman's tone, was laying the foundations in some respects, as I alluded to just a moment ago, about clubs, 6 or 7 clubs looking for the players they're looking at. He's almost sort of saying, look, this is a very difficult window. It's a difficult market. We're trying, and we are desperately wanting, and we know that we need players in. But he's almost sown the seed of, we might not get the players that you want, but we will get players in. Clearly, everyone's wanting a number 9, and the mood may shift this week if by Thursday they haven't got a striker in, because everyone's so sort of on edge about having someone up front. And I think Michael Beale is as well. If he's honest, and I think he's alluded to this from the start, that it's clear that they need a number 9, and that the 4 that they've got on the books at the moment aren't cutting the mustard, and will take time to do that. And a left back now because of the Huggins situation. So those 2 are the priority. I think the movement is obviously going to happen. The fact they let Bennett go to Greece, they did say that they wouldn't let anybody go until players were coming in. I think the fact that they've let a player go now sort of hints that movement now is starting to happen. Kjelder from Leeds looks like that's going to happen. Whether people will be overwhelmed or underwhelmed by that signing, I don't know. I think the bottom line is it's another body in at left back, centre back, where they need cover. The key for me, the crucial, I think they could be forgiven if they didn't get 3 or 4 players, and if they get a number 9. Because that clearly is the priority, and that's the one position everybody is sort of basically looking down the microscope and and focusing on that one position and hoping that they get it right.
Kiefer Moore's one that keeps creeping up, doesn't it? He was linked again yesterday. We were talking about experience just a minute ago. Is that something that Sunderland should be looking at, Scott?
Well, sorry, Scott. I'll jump in there. So I think Kiefer Moore, he would appease fans. People would like him. He's experienced. Saw him a few years back at Barnsley. Even then, we were saying this is the sort of player they should be going for. My only concern is I don't know what the issue is going to be with wages, and whether Sunderland are prepared to take on a 27-year-old with the model that Scott's been talking about and the way forwards. If they do that, does it show that they're willing to bend? We'll have to wait and see. But it certainly, I think if they sign more, it would appease fans and they would have an experienced number 9.
Yeah, so I agree. I agree with that. I think Sunderland are in their pitching, so that definitely suggests that they're serious about wanting him. And Kiefer Moore, with his track record, he was scoring for Bournemouth in the FA Cup just the other week. He is a completely different proposition to any of the 4 strikers that came in the summer. So straight away, that for me would be a massive upgrade. It's whether Sunderland can get him amid the kind of competition that we're hearing. Ipswich, Coventry, Cardiff. There's an emotional pull there with Cardiff. You would imagine Ipswich will probably be able to pay a bigger chunk of his wages than Sunderland. I think an awful lot of it will probably come down to Kiefer Moore and where he wants to go. And then clearly that will have to then tally in with what Bournemouth are willing to accept in terms of a percentage of his wages being paid. I don't think any of the Championship clubs who are in for him are going to be paying all of his wages. So it's whether Sunderland can get that over the line. And like I say, it's been a kind of issue that's been rumbling away all January, and to a large extent, it hasn't really moved. We've known there's going to be 5 or 6 Championship clubs in for Kiefer Moore. There still are. Where he's going to end up, really, your guess is as good as mine at the moment. But from what we're being told, Sunderland are definitely part of the conversation and are doing what they can, which, for something like this is all you can ask of them, really.
I know. I don't want to sound like I'm being a negative here, but I think if I was Keith Moore and, the likes of Ipswich were coming in for me, I think I would be looking at the longer term picture as well. Ipswich are more than likely able to afford, if Bournemouth now are prepared to loan him out, it certainly suggests that his future's not at Bournemouth. Yeah. And if Ipswich are one of those that could possibly be in the Premier League next season, if I was Keith Moore, I'd be thinking, well, hang on a minute, I can get a 3-year deal at Ipswich on higher wages that Sunderland are prepared to pay, and I can be back in the Premier League next season with Ipswich Town. So I think Sunderland have got a real battle on their hands to try and compete with clubs like that. Coventry will be the same, they're up there, thereabouts.
Yeah.
And they will unquestionably be paying bigger wages than Sunderland are.
I agree with that. I think the only thing I would say with that, and clearly these are the conversations that'll be going on at the minute, he's absolutely nailed on the start every week at Sunderland, isn't he?
True. Yeah.
Now, Ipswich, Chaplin, Hurst, Broadhead. I'm not saying that Moore doesn't necessarily, there's every chance he goes straight in if he goes there, but it's not as cut and dry. And clearly part of the big appeal for Kiefer Moore moving here is because he wants to be in the Wales side of these playoffs and potentially for the tournament in the summer. So, I think that's one pull that Sunderland do have, that if you come here, you'll start every game in the second half of the season unless you get injured or something goes horribly wrong. You know what I mean? And that might be a pull with it being
it's still an exciting proposition. Said this at the weekend. Sunderland's still a big club. It's an exciting proposition for any player to play in front of 40,000 a week at home, potentially in the playoffs and potentially, in the Premier League. The market, though, I keep on using that word market, but it is competitive. And as we alluded to earlier, those clubs at the top end of the Championship have got a lot of money. There's a lot of money swirling around in those clubs, which Sunderland, we know, haven't got. They haven't got, a bank account as deep as any of those clubs. And so they've got to sell it on the emotional. They've got to go with the emotional side of the deal rather than the financial side of it.
And I think the worry as well a little bit would be that if it's not Moore, if Moore doesn't happen, it's a fairly unusual window, this, I think, in that there's not a whole host of Premier League loan options, or there doesn't seem to be at the minute out there. I think the fact that Premier League clubs have players at AFCON and at the Asian Cup is a factor. I think you've got a lot of Premier League clubs that have a massive injury list that they've been carrying through Christmas kind of period and hasn't really resolved itself. So I think whereas in the past, you've probably been aware of 5 or 6 Premier League players who would definitely be heading out on loan. Well, unless something changes in the last couple of days in the window, and it might, because that does happen, it doesn't seem to me like there's a massive, where are the other Kiefer Moores? Well, at the moment, I'm not really sure. So the worry would be that if it's not Kiefer Moore, do Sunderland then find themselves having to delve back into the kind of untried overseas market, which is okay for long term, but clearly what you want to avoid is bringing in a player because you desperately need one to make the 4 from the summer a 5, because you're just signing another one with the same issues who's unproven and he's going to take a couple of months to settle and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a question that was put to Kristjaan Speakman, wasn't it? Like, in terms of balancing the panic from supporters in wanting someone to come in up front and then not doing exactly what you've just said. I suppose, how busy do you think they will be over these next couple of days? We've spoken about positions in terms of left back, centre midfield, up front being the 3. Can you see as many as that coming in?
I can. I do trust the process. I do think that they're clearly not sitting on their hands and doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs over the window. I mean, they are working exceptionally hard. I mean, Stuart Harvey, we know, basically is an absolute workaholic. It seems he's always in an aeroplane. He's always traveling around the world. He's always trying to get something done. And I think, they are unquestionably working very, very hard to do it. I think they will get the 3 or 4 in. Last year they did. It was late. I suspect they will again this year. I think Scott's absolutely right. It's the caliber, and are they improving the squad, or are they just making up the numbers, and that's going to be the balance they've got to strike somewhere, because what they do need to do at the moment with these 17 games to go, if they're serious about being in the top 6, is improve the squad and not just make up the numbers.
Yeah, agreed. I think, Hjelder's going to be confirmed in the next 24 hours by the sounds of things. Both ends seem to be saying that that's pretty much there. There will be a striker, I'm sure of that. And then I think there'll be a midfielder as well. So I think there probably will be 3 coming in. Then obviously Bennett's going, Pritchard's going. Surely one of Hemir or Mayenda will go out on loan, because, if you bring in a striker in, then surely you don't sit with 5 on your books. So I think there will be movement. Yeah, definitely. But as Nick says, it's this doesn't feel like a window where it does Sunderland an awful lot of good to make signings for the future. What they need is 2 or 3 signings for now, because we know where the squad is extremely light.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, you alluded to it there in terms of this window, but even looking ahead towards the summer window and the start of next season, does this period of sort of 6-7 months tell us what the ambitions are going to be from Kristjaan Speakman and Kavili Dreyfus?
Well, I think they will, and I think the summer's going to be important, because we spoke about it earlier. Jack Clark will probably go, I think, in the summer, and then we start to see what is the plan moving forward. Then you're into year 3 of the 5-year plan to get back in the Premier League. So if Clark goes, if 1 or 2 of the other starlets are prized away as well, the window in the summer is going to be extremely important, because then you're looking at not only, as we've just talked about, making up the numbers, because you will be making up the numbers then, because you'll have lost 2 or 3 key players, but B, again, you've got to take the level of quality up another notch, because you've lost, in theory, 2-3 Premier League players, because that's where they'll be going. You need to replace them with 2 or 3 probably Premier League top championship level players, because you're in year 3 of a plan to get back in the Premier League, and you need that quality in the squad. So while this January window is difficult, and I agree with Scott entirely, it's a window for the now. The summer window it's got to be the window for the future, and it's got to see the benchmark raised considerably if you're going to lose, which we think they will, those key players that have been part of this building process over the last 2 or 3 seasons.
Scott?
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think Nick's hit the nail on the head there. That this window is about making the squad ready for the second half of the season, the rest of the season, and trying to keep Sunderland in a promotion battle. The summer will be when we find out, are they able to raise the bar and begin to move to that next level? Because I don't think anyone's the model, the way that Sunderland want to work, only works if you do sell every now and then reinvest sensibly and effectively to enable you to raise the level of everything, the standard of the squad, the wage level, the price you're paying for players, the value of the squad. Everything raises if you do that effectively. But for all that there has been flack flying around about the recruitment, there's been some massive successes in the recruitment, Jack Clark being the obvious and shining example. So Sunderland have shown that they can operate at a certain level and bring in kind of rough diamonds and shine them up. What the next step is to sign a much more established level of player with a much higher value and raise the standard of the club in that way. Now, in some ways that's easier, but in other ways it's more difficult.
I guess obviously it all comes down to what division they'll end up playing in next season.
That's the kind of magic star at the end. That's the wild card, if you like. If Sunderland are in the Premier League next season, then
it changes the whole
very different conversation we have about a whole host of things. Yeah.
But I think our discussion is based on, and we're talking as if this will be another championship campaign next year. But Scott's right. If they do go up, And I do think it's a bit of a long shot at the moment. But if they were to go up, that whole summer window becomes completely different. Yeah. It's a completely different window because, then you've got to, be starting to, as Luton have found, and they've done it very well, actually. Of the three that went up, they're the most successful, aren't they? I mean, they're the ones that have got the balance right because they know exactly what they are as a football club. There's no pretensions to Luton. They know who they are, where they are, and they have been entirely sort of pragmatic about promotion. So yeah, two very different scenarios.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a conversation for an entirely different day, but I actually think that if Sunderland were to go up, I think their model, if you like, is pretty good for a club going up in the Premier League, because I think what they would do is they would sign players who they knew would hold their value, whatever happened in that season in the Premier League. What they wouldn't do, I'm pretty confident, is a Nottingham Forest blitzkrieg where you just sign 17 of here, there, and everywhere, bits of everything. Or almost a Burnley where you've kind of gone away from everything you seem to believe in getting you up once you get up there. I think there would be consistency from Sunderland's approach. I think that, clearly they'd have a completely different pot of money and a completely different standard of signing. But I think that the general principles of adding value to the squad and signing players that would hold their value and develop whatever would hold. So I actually think there'd be, I'd trust the kind of current regime and everything to make a reasonable fist of Sunderland going up in the Premier League. But as Nick says, we're a million, it feels a long, long way off that yet. Let's see. Hopefully we're having these conversations in the summer, but we shall see.
Yeah, I suppose the next step on the road to that is Middlesbrough on Sunday. We kind of lose the fact that there's a game at the end of the week, given that it's transfer deadline as well. It's always a tough one at the Riverside for Sunderland historically, and it's probably going to be the same again for them, isn't it?
No doubt about it. I don't think there's going to be a huge gap between the two teams at the minute. Where they are, Sunderland, I think, unquestionably their confidence is buoyed by that win over Stoke. But it does also, if you look at the game objectively, I'd still have concerns about how easy it was for Stoke to get into the Sunderland penalty area during the game. They're very vulnerable on the counter-attack. So it's a tricky one. I think Michael Beale is still under the microscope. There is still a lot of pressure on his shoulders, there's no question. But maybe Middlesbrough's not the worst game next for him. I think if it had been a Plymouth Argyle at home, which is the following weekend, the pressure would have been greater because, going into a game like Plymouth, if it went wrong, then the noise starts again. Borough is a game where he's going to go in on the back of a win. It's a game which I think people know could go either way, could swing either way, as long as they, don't. I mean, this sounds he can't, he won't want to lose, but I don't think it's a game. If he lost, then there wouldn't be such rancor at that defeat as there would be against a Plymouth or a Swansea. If he gets a draw or wins the game, great, well and good. He can move on, and Sunderland can move on. It's not the worst fixture on the back of that win against Stoke for Michael Beale to be contemplating next weekend.
Yeah, and for all that we've said that it's a week of upheaval at Sunderland, it's potentially a week of upheaval at Middlesbrough as well, because they're trying to bring in a striker and at the moment not having an awful lot of success. Looks like Morgan Rogers will probably end up with Villa. They've turned down 3 bids now, but feels like that one will probably happen before the end of the window. So there's going to be a bit of to and fro with the Borough squad between now and Sunday as well. So that will be a factor for Middlesbrough in the same way that what happens in the rest of the window will be a factor for Sunderland as well.
It feels as though this is, you can look at league tables and the numbers on it in terms of the season and the halfway point, but it feels once we get the other side of the transfer window in January, that is when the second half of the season really kicks on. It's like this is your chance to really go and kick on, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, it historically is, and I guess the most famous one from the Sunderland perspective was when Roy Keane was here and brought in 6 players, didn't he, in that January window, and they kicked on the second half of the season and lost that one game at Colchester. But I think this is, they're in a good position, Sunderland, that, for all the, sarcasm from Michael Beale last week when he said, we're in a crisis, we're 6th in the table. They are. I mean, they are sixth in the table. They're joint sixth, if you like, on goal difference with Coventry. They're in a good position. They've got the opportunity to kick on following the transfer window, and fingers crossed it does work out okay. And we know that on their day, Sunderland are a good team to watch. I think we saw a little bit of the old Sunderland come back on Saturday against Stoke, a bit more forward thinking, a bit more confident, a bit more on the front foot. I think they plattered out a little bit in the games preceding that for a lot of reasons. But I think, now they can sort of knuckle down, get back to the sort of football we know they can play. And on their day, they're as good as anybody in the league. It's consistency. And what they've got to do now is find that consistency. Yeah,
we are almost there. We're almost through the end of the January window. So we'll call it a time there. Thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you both. Nick, thank you ever so much for coming on and joining us.
Pleasure.
For those of you who want to hear more from Nick Barnes, you will tune in to him over at BBC Radio Newcastle. I'm sure we'll look to try and get you on before the end of the season. Scott, pleasure as always.
No problem.
And make sure to like and subscribe our channels. As I said at the start, you can subscribe for just £1 for 6 months worth of content. We'll be back later in the week to preview that Middlesbrough game in a bit more depth after what will hopefully be a busy end to the transfer window for Sunderland. Thanks for joining us.